The MMA fighter who went on the record with 13 News Now to say he did not expose himself at a busy shopping center. Now Imani Smith is defending himself in a Virginia Beach courtroom. 13 News Now reporter Stephen Graves was in court as the judge decided Smith's fate.
Emotions high as family of Imani Smith stands strong in defense, confident that even after a judge's guilty ruling...
No, I understand the media, but he's innocent.
The MMA fighter putting up a fight of his own in court against 10 charges in all of exposing himself and simulating masturbation in front of women. Each incident happening earlier this year at Lansdowne Common Shopping Center in Virginia Beach. During the hours-long hearing, each of the 6 women identified Smith as the one who would in some cases ask for directions to a restaurant, then expose himself in a car. Others say they were shopping or sitting in their car when Smith would strike up conversation, then casually commit the crime. Some women said they even took pictures of the car Smith was driving. That's how police say they nailed down a license plate that connected the vehicle to Smith. But his attorney argues that her client was in other places when the acts happened, and the victim's descriptions of the suspect vary, posing a reason for doubt. Your client was sentenced. Do you think it was fair?
No comment.
Smith was ultimately sentenced to 3 years in jail. The judge said evidence was compelling in every woman's case. Before being sentenced, he told family to make sure his real story was told. Stephen Graves, 13 News Now.